Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode. Today we're looking at another 35mm SLR single lens reflex camera, this time from Pentax. They kind of dropped the Asahi prefix that they had on the earlier cameras. This one dates back all the way back from 1981, I do believe. The MV was launched in 1980 and was only available in the black finish. 1981 saw the launch of the MV1, and then this only lasted about another year, and then that was replaced by the Pentax MG. The MV1 has a number of improvements over the original MV, in so much that it has a self-timer, whereas the original MV didn't. It also on the back has this memo holder, which is designed to put the end of the film box in to remind you A, that there's a film in the camera, and B, what the speed rating and the number of exposures was. The metering is also slightly different in that this one uses silicon photodiodes. The camera uses a Seiko electronically timed shutter, and it gives you shutter speeds steplessly, so the camera can choose a shutter speed of say 130th. It's not stuck in the normal pattern of shutters that we're used to where the speed's near enough double. This can set the shutter speed very accurately. Ranges between, I'd say, about 5 seconds all the way through to 1,000th of a second. Okay, let's give you a quick overview of the camera. This one has the wrong lens on it, by the way. This one has an MA lens, you can probably see that. This is really designed for automatic cameras, and you can see that by the aperture dial. You'll see at the very end it has this A on it, and that's for cameras in the Pentax range that can run a program mode and can set the aperture on the lens. This one can't do that. It's an aperture preferred automatic. The only function it has is the auto function if you want metering. There's no manual metering available on this camera. So let's start with the top plate. Over on the right hand side we have the usual film advance lever. It does sit part way out from the body, and that's how you would cock the shutter, which in this case is cocked. You can hear the sound of it, and every time you wind on it advances the film counter in this window here to show you how many exposures you've taken. This is the mode selector dial, so as you can see I've got it on 100x. That would be auto, which is the aperture preferred, so you would set the aperture, the camera would figure out the right shutter speed and set it for you. 100 is the flash synchronization speed. That ties in with the fact that we've got a metal vertical travelling shutter rather than a silk cloth horizontal shutter. So that's why we have a flash sync of 100th of a second. That's why it's got the red X on it. Also couples in with the X on the hot shoe here. If you're using the dedicated Pentax flash, which off the top of my head I can't remember the number of it, but it will set the shutter speed to 100th of a second. If the camera is set on auto, it will automatically communicate with the camera. Can use it with other flashes. There's no PC connection. You can't cable connect a flash to the camera. And the B mode is for bulb, which means the shutter will stay open as long as you keep the shutter release button depressed, like so. This is threaded for a cable release, so you can use it on a tripod with a cable release. There's a small window down here. I don't know if you can zoom in and see that, but when you advance the film it changes colour to red, and when you fire the shutter it changes to black, so you know if the camera's cocked or not. Quite a useful feature. You don't see that very often on cameras. It's a nice little feature. Hot shoe on the top. This is your viewfinder window. This is what you'll be looking through to compose your picture. On this side we have the film rewind crank. This just folds out the usual fashion, it just revolves. You can pull it up, and if you pull it up another click the back of the camera flies open. around this we have the speed dial for the film. So this is the marked ASA, but we call it ISO nowadays. And to adjust this, to set it to your film speed, you lift the collar up and you turn it round. As you can see, it goes from 32, which isn't particularly low, all the way through to 1600. So you just lift and turn. We're going to put some film in this today, so we're actually going to put 100 ASA film in it, so I'll set it to 100. Now underneath this, I don't know whether you can see it, there's this dial underneath here, which is marked in, that's a bit better, it's a bit sharper, isn't it? In plus or minus 2 stops. So you can see that there's dots around there, and you have to line those dots up. As you can see, the middle dot here is aligned with 100, so that tells us the speed of the film normally. And what you can do is you can change it. This is the way you do your exposure compensation. It's not the best way of doing it. Other camera makers seem to do it better with just a button that's hiding it underneath here. But you can see as I move this, that's giving you plus 1 or 2 stops. Going back the other way gives you minus 1 or 2 stops. It's not the most easiest of things, and when that's down it's hidden. There is a little orange dot visible next to the 100, just to let you know that is the actual speed of the film that you're using. When you start changing the ASA backwards and forwards, it's a bit fiddly, it's not really in line with the camera. This is a entry-level camera, very similar to the Canon T50 that we've seen recently, in that you put it on automatic, you choose your aperture depending on the depth of field and the amount of sunlight or light generally that there is, and the camera chooses the appropriate shutter speed. In the viewfinder, all you'll see is 3 LEDs on the left hand side. Traffic light system, red, amber and green. Red means overexposure, so that means you've got to close the aperture, what we call down, so you've got to make the aperture number bigger, which makes the hole in the lens smaller. If you've got an amber light, that means that the shutter speed is going to be below a 30th, so you need to open the aperture up and let more light in to get a higher shutter speed, or put it on a tripod. If the green light is illuminated, fine, just carry on shooting as you are, it's not a problem. Quite an attractive camera. These are obviously available in chrome and black. Self-timer was added to this one. Let's just make sure we're in 100. And this is the self-timer, so you just move it all the way down. And then to activate it, you just give it a little nudge. And you can hear it's a clockwork mechanism, it's not electronic. 4 to 10 seconds delay, and there it fires the shutter. That's how you take selfies in the old film days. You'd put this on a wall or a tripod and set the self-timer and get your pose, and off you go. Lens mount is not the threaded Pentax mount that we all know and love. This one is the Pentax K mount, a bayonet mount. So most manufacturers moved away from the screw mounts and went into the bayonet. This is the release button down here. Turn the lens anti-clockwise and it just comes off like that. Here you can see inside the reflex mirror. Don't ever touch that or the focusing screen above. So this is where the light gets reflected up into the viewfinder, so you can see exactly what the lens is seeing. That's why it's called a single lens reflex. And when you fire the shutter, the mirror moves out of the way and the shutter fires behind it. And that's how it takes the photograph. On the bottom, this one, unlike the original MV, also accepts an auto winder. So this is the connection underneath here where the auto winder mechanically connects to the advance mechanism and will advance the film and cock the shutter for you. This little button down here is to disengage the sprocket inside, and that enables you to rewind the film. So when you finish taking all the pictures on the roll, you can depress this button and the film will then travel backwards, and you can wind it back into the light tight cassette ready for development. Tripod bush, battery compartment, takes two LR44s or SR44s, and there's some electrical connections and a guide pin also for holding the auto winder on. It's not a motor drive, it only manages about 1.5, maybe 2 frames a second if it's on good batteries with a high enough shutter speed, so it's not fast, but it's just convenient to use, and they were very popular actually. Auto winders, very popular. Right, to mount the lens, got a red dot there. On the lens you'll see that there's a red dot on the lens as well, you can see it's just there. You're just going to line the red dots, turn it clockwise until you hear it click, and then it's quite securely locked on. Like I say, this is the wrong lens really for this one, it's not the lens it would have come with. This is for a later model of camera, but yeah, it's a 50mm Pentax lens. Focus ring, aperture ring, and your depth of field scale, so it shows you the amount of area that's going to be covered depending on the aperture that you select. On the back, just a memo holder, a couple of lug straps for attaching a camera strap if you want to hang it around your neck, but I don't really advise that. Having cameras banging around, it's not a great thing to be doing. Right, remember to open the back, pull this up, make sure the shutter speed is set to 100. If it's set on automatic you might end up with a really long exposures while you're loading the film. And there we can see the inside of the camera. So on this side there's a little bit of a pressure plate that's designed to hold the film cartridge in situation over here. We have the pressure plate to keep the film flat. Don't go getting greasy prints all over that, the film has to move over it, any dirt or whatever on there will scratch the film. Here we have the take-up spool, this is sort of multi-slotted. It's got all these sort of needle things on there, and the idea of that is it's going to grab the leader and pull it through. You can see the sprocket drive here, which is locked. It will only go one way, it will only go forward, it won't go backwards until you push the button in on the bottom, and then it will allow the film to be rolled back into the cassette before you unload the camera. Here we see the shutter, another area, don't touch the shutter, don't get any oil or anything on it. The shutter's quite a precision piece of kit. So made by Seiko, as you can see it's a vertical shutter. When you fire it, it moves down to the bottom. And this is where your film goes, this is going to be the film chamber. So today we're going to load it up with some 100 ISO film, or 100 ASA film. And this is one of my favourite black and white films. It's quite a cheap one actually. This is Fomopan, and this is 135 is the size of film, or that's often called 35mm, 36 exposure, and this is 100 ASA or 100 ISO nominally. So we drop that in there, so it just sits in there like that. You can see which way it goes in. Pops in that way around. That just sits in there. And the film then goes across, this is called the film gate. And the idea with these metal strips is to keep the film in a straight line and stop it moving up and down. Goes over the sprockets drive through these holes in the film, that's what pulls it through the camera. And on this side we've got the take-up spool. Not the easiest of cameras to load, I don't think, but you can see here, hopefully, that this goes into these needles. It's hard to see because the camera's in the way and my hands are in the way and everything's in the way. But yeah, the film's going to go around the back and then come up to the front. It's not going to go across and round that way. So you have to feed this leader into the needles and then very gently try and advance it round until you get both of these lined up with the sprockets. So you can see there the sprockets are lined up with the holes, and there you can see the film coming round from the other side where it's been grabbed by these needles here. So what I like to do is I go back to this side, I lower this back down and it will drop in when it lines up with the spool inside, and you can just tighten it up. You want this to be nice and tight. And then we can close the back up with a click. This has been advanced, so when we move the film, you should notice that this one goes round. You can fold that away now that it's loaded. And then we look into here, which is the window. This is on 0. Fire the shutter. Wind it on again. That's 0. Wind it on again. That's going to be shot number 1. We know it's cocked because this little indicator's turned red. So we can just push that back there, and that is the camera loaded, ready to go with film. Hopefully we can get outside soon and actually get this roll of film shot and developed and see what sort of results we get with it. I don't think I've shot a film through this camera yet, actually. Nice little camera though, well built. Pentax cameras tend to be fairly well built, it's quite robust. It's a metal top and bottom. It's a metal casing with a nice sort of grip on it. It's a nice size. I'll zoom you out the other way, you can see. Move that out of the frame. You can see it's a nice size, not too heavy. It's not as heavy as some of the other cameras that we featured on the channel. It's no lightweight by any means, but yeah, it's a solid camera. It should give you many years of good service. I'd say this date's from early 1980s, so what's that, 30, 40 years old? It's still working fine. So yeah, there we have it folks, that's the camera for today. Pentax MV1. Not that many of them around, not particularly expensive if you can find one. If you're into Pentax lenses and the K-mount lenses. I've got another one here which the mount is actually shared. This is from Cosina. Cosina used the K-mount. Also Ricoh, who now own Pentax, they also used the K-mount on quite a few of their cameras as well. So there's quite a lot of these K-mount lenses about. Third-party makers like Tamron and Sigma, they made lenses in the K-mount as well. Pentax lenses, some of them are quite expensive, but generally they're pretty good value. They are superb lenses. So there you go folks, there's a camera for today, Pentax MV1. Thank you very much for watching. A like and a subscribe is always appreciated. Any questions, comments, queries, anything I've messed up in this one, just let me know down in the comments. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.